please don't think I'm being trifling. But when people talk about the great disappointment of 1844, I got an answer to that. 1844 was a great disappointment. And why didn't men see it? It's in Revelation chapter 10. The answer's there. Ellen White says God put his hand over it. Why didn't the end come in 1844? I'll tell you why. My people by the millions were slaves. Forbidden by law to read these marvelous things. And there's a text in the Bible that says, they without us. Not going anywhere. Not going anywhere. My people would have to be set free first. And before God touched Ellen White, he touched William Foy, a black man. Gave him visions which he shared. And he and Ellen White were friends. And she would say, yes, that's what I saw. The same vision that he had given to Ellen White. Black man learned to talk with God. And God decided he's ready. Set him free. But even the Congress of the United States was filled with men in their brocade shirts and their beautiful clothes who enjoyed mint juleps and the privilege of sitting on a throne, as it were, every day. This is the way it was. They couldn't get the votes. Have you ever read that thing on the wall at the Jefferson Memorial where he says all men are created equal? They wrote, but didn't believe what they wrote. Jefferson was a slaver. And I could go on, no point in it. So God kept trying to stir the consciences of the rich, and they would not be stirred. So God reached back in the wilderness of Kentucky and chose a homely, lanky woodcutter. And God said to him, Abe, I got a job for you. Why me, Lord? Because you will be able to empathize in a way that nobody else can. Those people are poor, you are poor. Those people lived in a log cabin, you lived in one. Those people ate fat back pork and peas, so did you. There's something about it that will help you to empathize and to understand. Their hands are calloused with labor, hard labor, never justified by salary. So are yours. Abe, got a job for you. And this lanky, homely, humble man said, I'm going to prepare myself. And if I get a chance to hit this thing, I'm going to hit it hard. From all I read, Abraham Lincoln didn't have much religion. Maybe that's why God could use him. Gave him a platform. God hath made of one blood all the nations of men to dwell upon the face of the whole earth. And the course he took led to a bitter civil war. The bloodiest war in the history of the United States of America to this day. When they fought the Battle of Manassas, people left Washington and went out as close as they dared get on a hill and watched the battle. Finally, they got discouraged and left. The reason is when the South would seem to win, suddenly the North would drive them back. And it went back and forth and back and forth several times. The Spirit of prophecy says God punished the South for slavery and the North for permitting it. If you think that's foreign, read the second inaugural address down at the Lincoln Memorial. It is said there that they shed the blood of men, brothers, for those who endorsed slavery and those who simply carried it out. It's not fair to blame God for the work of racists and hypocrites, sinful men. Sinful men can take flowers and turn it into dope. Sinful men can take corn and turn it into liquor. Not the purpose of God, purposes of men. And everything they said, everything Jesus said and taught and lived and believed was opposed to this hogwash that somebody is superior to another and deserves to be a slave. Real Christians took the lead in breaking out of this. It wouldn't be fair to tell you what I just did without telling you this. The first stirrings of the American conscience about black men being set free came from Roger Williams, way back yonder. He sowed the seed. It grew into a great oak. Roger Williams, of all people, a Quaker, Christian Quaker by the name of George Fox, warned against slavery in 1657. Imagine that. 1657. Benjamin Loy wrote that all slave keepers are apostates. And his life was in danger for having written it. A Quaker by the name of Anthony Benazet and John Woolman, his partner, went to the South and preached this stuff publicly. It's a wonder they weren't cut down immediately. But God was working. John Wesley, founder of the Methodist Church, to which I used to belong. John Wesley wrote thoughts on slavery. Benjamin Rush, a Presbyterian, said a Christian slave owner is a contradiction of terms. Cannot be both. If he owns slaves, he's not a Christian. If he's a Christian, he doesn't own slaves. Samuel Hopkins, a Congregationalist preacher, said the same thing. John Brown. Amen. John Brown gave his life in a wrongful pursuit of this dream. And I want to tell you something, because some of you don't know this. The first president of the General Conference had an underground railroad station in his house. Somebody say amen to that. And all you got to do is read the writings of the servant of the Lord, and you'll know where she stands, because you'll know where God stands. Christians started and fed the flames of abolition. Their cry expanded into the cannon roar of the Civil War. Their marching song was, "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Christians, Ralph David Abernathy, Reverend Lee, Reverend Fauntleroy. I guess the point I want to make is, if you think man came from a monkey, if you really believe that, then you're justified in the stupidity of racism and the nefarious idea of one man born superior to another. Greece ruled the world. A slave could be bought for about $90. By the time Rome ruled the world, a slave could be bought for $30. His value was decreasing. But with God, his value was increasing. And wherever the Christian idea obtains, A slave can't be bought at any price. Would you say amen to that? And I want to tell you something else. Jesus has purchased us, and we are not for sale. And it cost him everything that he had. But we are his by creation and by redemption. He paid the price. The first part of all this was the test. Now comes the testimony. Jesus purchased everyone, and the best saint in the world belongs to him. Might not know it, but he belongs to Jesus. And so does the absolute worst, nefarious creature who calls himself a man. When I was a boy, there wasn't a lot to do, and we used to go to town, and East Market Street was ours. Now, there were two people you were going to see on East Market Street, it seems to me, every time you went. One was Drusilla. That's another subject altogether. And the other was a man named Mr. Williams. I never saw Williams that he wasn't drunk. If he wasn't drunk, he looked like it. And here he would come, begging for a dime to get more to drink. And Earl Cleveland came to Greensboro, ran a meeting. Williams joined. Nobody had any confidence in him. Last time I saw Williams, he was a deacon in my home church. Jesus has purchased us. Now it's up to us what we want to make of it. You want to be a fool? Is that your testimony? Or are you willing to let God develop you? And develop us he did. Africa was awakened. He inspired all men to superlative heights in the field of education. Just think of one name, Booker T. Washington. In governments, William Hastie was the first, and a man by the name of Barack Obama, the last. When it comes to law, Thurgood Marshall, nobody equals him. When it comes to music, Marian Anderson and anybody else, including the soloists this morning. Oh yeah. When it comes to science, stop with George Washington Carver. People come to me making excuses. I say, listen, George Washington Carver was sold for a horse. He had an excuse. But the White House beckoned him. You ever hear of Hippocrates? Scientist? Hippocratic Oath? Black man. Daniel Hale Williams? Open heart surgery? Black man. Charles Drew, who invented the system for preserving blood plasma, saving thousands of lives during World War II. The black man. Military, Crispus Attucks, Novature, all the way down to Powell, the tops. What about orators? None was better than Fred Douglass, and none was better than Sojourner Truth. What I'm trying to show is God will make of you what you will allow him to. Don't ever be discouraged. Don't ever come to the point that you are not willing to go forward in faith. Don't ever lose your connection with the Lord Jesus Christ. He has already purchased you, and he's interested in that which he has redeemed.
That's right. That's right.
It's up to us. In this country today, More college graduates, black, are graduated each year than in Great Britain and Canada put together. Now, at the same time, there are others who make fools out of themselves. It troubles me deeply that men died, shed their blood to open doors, and all of a sudden we got a crowd that won't walk through the doors. They can even go to school free. But don't be held back by those either. You individually have been purchased. You, no matter how low on the totem pole you appear to be, you belong to the King. Hallelujah. And Jesus can make out of you what he desires. I want to skip these pages and get through. But use what the Lord has given you. You know, you all have heard this. I was accepted in pre-dentistry. In 1947, I graduated from high school at 16, and 4 of us buddies applied. It made sense. You couldn't afford to go off at a boarding school. People were poor in those days. You understand what I mean? Poor. So we applied to this big state university, and all of us were accepted. And 2 weeks before school was to open, 2 weeks, I wasn't looking for anything. I knew where I was going, I thought. 2 weeks before school opened, the Lord called me by my first name. Now, he's only done that twice. He called me Charles. The other time he called me was when I was a senior and I was choosing a wife. He said, Charles, that's the one. 2 weeks. My buddies went off to A&T and I went to Oakwood, and 61 years of blessed privilege in the ministry. What a joy God has been. 60 years of marriage. Thank you. How wonderful God has been. All right, in closing, Pastor, where are we going? I'm sorry to tell you, many of us are going to hell. For the very reasons we just touched on. We have been purchased, but we won't do anything about it. We won't follow our master.
Help us, Jesus. Help us.
So we're going to be lost. And I am so sorry to say that. But the bottle, the dope, and the hatred have wasted the life's forces of many. Revelation chapter 7 and verse 9. After this, I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and tongues and people stood before the Lamb. What for? To testify. Just and true are thy ways, thou King of Saints. That's my testimony today. Don't tell me what God can do. I'll tell you what he can do. Pick up a poor boy out of Greensboro, North Carolina. Nobody went away to boarding school. Couldn't afford it. You went to school locally. The Lord called me. My father said, no, I will not give you a dime. That was on Wednesday. On Sabbath, my daddy was baptized. On Monday, he gave me every dime he had. $310. You think I'm going to forget that? That was like $3,500 today. And my daddy said, son, I wish I could do more. But I'm giving you a good name. I want you to take care of that. I went off to school. I worked. They did the best they could. In 4 years, when they walked down the aisle, guess who was in the game? Oh, yeah. When they flipped the tassels, guess who flipped his? Oh, yeah. I have been bought. I'm not for sale.
That's right.
1997, I got a call from this huge high school, Pastor Brooks. We watch you on Brother Black. Would you come and deliver a memorial message this year? I said, do you mean for my classmates, since this is our 50th anniversary? Or do you mean general? General. I said, then send me a list of the ones in my class who are known to be deceased. 2 or 3 days, the list came. There were 3 dentists on the list. I'm the only one still alive. That's a good deal. Amen. The Lord has purchased us. So the black man, enslaved and persecuted, misrepresented, bastardized. You want to know what that means? See me after the service. Jim Crowed, underprivileged, misunderstood, the last hired in the first fire. Standing firmly with Christ, comes into his own. With a voice together shall they sing, and they shall see eye to eye when the Lord shall bring them again to Zion. He owns you. Act like it.